Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. You are listening to Sunrise After Midnight, the Grief First Aid Series. I am Deborah Hamm, and this is episode 2. Last episode, we introduced this series, what it is, why it exists, and why it matters. If you missed episode 1, I want to encourage you to go back and listen because episode 1 lays the foundation for everything we are exploring together in this series. But today, we go a little deeper. Today, we will go into the heart of what grief actually is. The title of today's episode is Grief is More Than Sadness. Grief is more than sadness. I want to stop for a second and ask you one question. If you asked some people, maybe some people sitting next to you in the church pews, family members, friends, co-workers, if you were to ask one simple question, and that question was, what do you think grief is? Describe grief in one word. What do you think they would say? Kind of gave you a few seconds to think about that for a moment. Some of you may have said the one word that you would associate with grief is the word sad. And that's true. I'm not going to debate that because grief is sad. I'm not going to argue at all with that because grief is associated with tears, with heaviness. And there's a kind of quietness also that settles over a person's life when someone or something that they love is gone. So, yes, grief is absolutely sad. But here's what I want you to consider today. On today's episode, when I said grief is more than just sadness, I want you to realize that sadness is only one piece. It's only one piece. And as we look today, we realize that as we are dealing with the many different facets of grief, we need to look at the whole picture. Sometimes when we're not looking at the whole picture, we can miss the person right in front of us who is hurting in ways that do not always look like crying. Sometimes we can miss the person who is angry all the time and do not know why they're angry. Sometimes we can miss the person who cannot remember anything and thinks that something is wrong with them medically. You see, when we miss these persons, sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case in every situation, but sometimes you look at maybe even the person who was active a lot in church, coming to church all the time, and all of a sudden they're not there anymore. And sometimes people may assume that that person has backslidden. And that's not even the case either. You see, in the examples that I just mentioned to you, in some cases, remember, emphasis on some cases, these persons may be grieving. And in this grief, they can be experiencing some of the dimensions that we are not taught to recognize. And in some cases, we don't even have a discussion on. And that's what today is about. I want to say this much to you. Grief, when I said grief is so much more than sadness, that's why I decided to say it is a five-dimensional experience. And when we learn more about it, and when we learn the names and the types, we become better at caring for ourselves as well as caring for others who may be going through this. Myself, I got tired of my midnight seasons. S, yes, seasons, plural, yes, of grief. And I am now walking in my sunrise season. I'm walking in my season of sunrise now. I did not get here by pretending that the pain was not real. I got here by learning what grief actually was, by naming it and by walking through it 1 second at a time. And I want to say to every person who's listening right now, don't give up. Do not give up. Please do not give up. Your sunrise is coming. So let's get into the teaching. The very first dimension that I want to address is one that most people associate with grief, and that is the emotional part of it. We always associate the emotions, but I want you to know this, that we are not just feelings. Think about that for a second. We are not just feelings, because a human being is a whole person, a whole person. You are a body, your mind, your behavior, your spirit. And when grief shows up, I'm going to tell you something. When grief shows up in your life, it does not just knock on one door, it walks through the whole house. Think about that for a minute. It walks through the whole house. It may touch your emotions, it may touch your body, and it can change how you think. It can shift what you do. And in some cases, with some people, it can even shake the very foundation of their faith. Now, let me stop right here. I did not say or question anyone's faith. I said in some cases, it can shake the foundation of a person's faith. And we may not want to accept that, but that is reality. That is reality. That is why I describe grief as a 5-dimensional experience. And today, I want to walk through each one. So I want to invite you, as we're studying today, to think about yourself. Think about someone else in your life. Think about somebody that you love. And if you see any of this, learn how to interact better and care for. I want to say a quote that I learned last week from Lisa Nichols. The quote is as follows: "You'll learn how to recognize when you're living in a country called sad, in the town called Victimville, on the street called Hurt Lane, so you don't stay there longer than you need to." I'm going to repeat that quote from Lisa Nichols. It said, "You'll learn how to recognize when you're living in the country called sad, in the town called Victimville, on the street called Hurt Lane, so you don't stay there longer than you need to." When I read that quote last week, I said, wow. It made me think. It made me think. Because you see, sadness is real, but it does not have to become your permanent address. I'm going to repeat that. Sadness is real, but it does not have to become your permanent address. I would like to say, please do not choose or select for sadness to become your permanent address. Let's go a little further into the 5 dimensions, okay? The first one we're going to deal with is emotional. Let's start with, what does that look like? Emotional. One of the things about the emotional part is, not only is it real, but it can be a little complicated. A little complicated because grief is not one emotion. It's not just sadness that shows up and stays in one place. For many people, grief can feel like 10 emotions in 1 hour. You're like, 10? Yes. For some people, grief can show up as 10 emotions in 1 hour. That's a lot of emotions, straight up. It can feel like a storm that keeps changing direction. One moment you wake up, you might be feeling sad. Then all of a sudden you feel angry. But get this, you don't even know what you're angry at. Then you feel numb, like someone turned the volume all the way down on your life. Then something very small can happen. It could be just a song, music, a favorite song. It could be a smell, a certain perfume or cologne. It can be a memory. And guess what? The feelings can come flooding back. That is reality. And sometimes this can confuse some people because they don't understand what's going on, what's happening. You can all of a sudden, I'm talking about emotions right now. You can all of a sudden be having a very good day. You can be laughing, you could be enjoying a meal, you could be enjoying time with someone, and all of a sudden it shifts. It shifts. Your emotions can just shift just like that on a dime. Because sometimes people can be enjoying themselves to the degree that they wonder, how can I be having so much fun when my person is no longer here? I'm not saying a right or wrong. I'm saying what really happens in some cases. I'm not saying this happens with every person. I'm not. I'm saying with some, this can happen. And for some people, these are some of the signs and part of grief. Every single one of them. It's very important to know this because when a grieving person seems like they cannot hold themselves together, they're laughing one minute, they're crying the next minute, they're angry for no clear reason, just out of the blue. That is not necessarily a person being unstable. That's not necessarily true. That is not a weakness. For some people, that is just grief doing what it does. That's what it is. But I want to invite you to give yourself and the people around you permission to feel whatever emotions they have to feel, because it's also a part of their healing. Every tear is not a sign that something is wrong. Have you ever heard the phrase where people say, I'm crying tears of joy? Sometimes the tear can be of a memory that brought so much joy that it brought tears to a person's eye. So every tear is not a sign that something is wrong. Every flash of anger is not character flaw. And every moment when a person finds that maybe they're not okay, you know how they say it's okay to not be okay, that is not a betrayal of the person you lost, because the emotions shift so unexpectedly that sometimes people just get confused just from the shift of the emotions itself. Also, the emotional shift can be a sign of the love that you have for the person or persons or whatever it was that you lost. That connection is what mattered. That connection mattered. And that is the heart still working. You know what I'm saying? That's the heart still working, still moving through a process that's bigger than words can express. The heart is still moving. I want to, right here, gently and with humility and with love, encourage you to let the emotions come. Sometimes the emotions will come and they'll hit, and before you know it, that emotion is gone too. Sometimes they linger a little longer, sometimes they don't. And when you are ready, the next dimension may help you to understand that grief does not stop with your feeling. Because for some people, it actually goes a little deeper than that. But I want you to know something. God sees every single emotion you are carrying right now, the ones you can name and the ones you cannot name. God is not overwhelmed by your anger. He is not put off by your numbness. God is not surprised by the grief that shows up at 2 o'clock in the morning, at 3 in the morning, at midnight. But I'm going to tell you something what Psalms 56 and 8 says. It says that God keeps every tear. That means not one of them has gone unnoticed. God keeps every tear. Your sunrise may feel like it's far away when you're grieving, or if you're grieving at this particular time, but God has not taken his eyes off of you. I'm going to give you a source from my studies on today. The source is coming from the National Cancer Institute, the United States federal government's primary health research agency. And this is what the National Cancer Institute said. It said normal or common grief reactions may include numbness and disbelief, anxiety from the distress of separation, sadness, anger, and even grief. In some cases, guilt. In some cases, these are things what the National Cancer Institute said. They said normal or common grief reactions may include numbness and disbelief, anxiety from distress of separation. They said it may also include sadness. It may also include anger. This is what it said. Look it up. When I give a resource, even when I give a biblical scripture, I encourage you to look it up and read it for yourself. Now, there was a PhD. His name is Alan Wolfelt, Wolfelt, Wolfelt. He wrote this. He said, grief is a multi-emotional experience, a multi-emotional experience. He said it's not just sadness, but it's fear. He said that the emotions can shift rapidly within a single hour, which lets you know it can change. Your emotions can shift at a drop of a dime. That's what I mean when I say you can experience the emotions you can experience 10 emotions within 1 hour. But let's go into dimension number 2. And that's going to be physical. Because grief and the body interact. And when you deal with the physical aspect of grief, this is one of the ones that sometimes can be the most important, yes, yet the most that is misunderstood. Because when we think about grief as an emotion, we can handle that. We can deal with that. We can realize that a person is crying, they're going through this because it's emotion. But when we only think about grief as an emotion, what happens is we can miss what may be happening right inside of the body of a person who is hurting. It's easy to miss because our perception is only on dimension number 1, which is emotion. For some people, grief lives in the body. It lives in the body. Think about someone you know who might be grieving, or someone you knew who was grieving. Have they ever mentioned that they felt just numb? They felt tight chest, or maybe they felt trouble breathing, or maybe they felt like their arms was just heavy. The legs felt heavy. They couldn't move. They had stomach problems. They had headaches. They just couldn't sleep. Their sleep pattern was so off. They couldn't sleep. Or maybe they are sleeping too much. And even though they're sleeping too much, they're still waking up exhausted, tired. That may be a form of grief. I am not a licensed physician. I am not a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. I am speaking from life experience and research. You see, the body may be carrying what the words cannot say, and that can be grief. Some people really do stop eating. They don't eat as much as they used to. They just don't have an appetite. Others eat constantly. Look, that's just the opposite because they're trying to fill an emptiness that food was never designed to fill. Food can't fill that emptiness. Some people find that they get sick more easily. Their body is working very hard just to keep them going. These are signs. These are some signs of grief. There's one sign that I want to mention to you that deals with the body, physical side of grief that maybe some people don't mention, and it's called broken heart syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it is true. And it is called broken heart syndrome. Now, with this broken heart syndrome, I want you to please hear me very clearly because some people may have experienced it and not even knew what it was. Broken heart syndrome is a real medical condition. It is not a metaphor. Doctors call it, I got to take a moment here to enunciate this right, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. I'm not going to try to pronunciate that again. I'll spell it for you. Takotsubu, as in boy, O, cardiomyopathy. It is a temporary weakening of the heart's main pumping chamber, and it can be triggered by several emotional stress. Several things connected to emotional stress can trigger it. And that includes the loss of a loved one. Now, Harvard Health Publishing and the Cleveland Clinic, they both recognize this and diagnose it as a medical condition. They both recognize the condition. You see, grief can literally show up in the heart. It can show up in the heart. This is not something anyone, it can happen. Does it happen to everyone? No. No, it doesn't. But it can happen to some. This is the body responding to one of the hardest things a human being can go through. That's your body reacting because grief is not in the head. For many people, grief has a body. Has a body. I want to share something with you. It's not based on any particular person, okay? But it's something that reflects what grief can look like when it goes unrecognized. Think about someone they look fine on the outside. They look really good. Their home is clean. They look good. They're still showing up to places that they need to be. They're still being on time. But quietly, their memory has started slipping. Their self-esteem has taken a hit that they just cannot explain because in their mind, they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. They poured themselves into a relationship. This person poured themselves into a relationship emotionally, financially, completely. And that relationship ended in a divorce. You didn't know I was going there, did you? See, what happened was this. They poured so much of themselves into it to when the paperwork came for a divorce in some cases, it showed up. Where they were showing up all the time, they kept their home clean, kept themselves clean or well together, but the body was reacting and responding differently because what they gave to in that relationship was not honored. What they invested was not returned. And now they are carrying not just a broken heart from a divorce, but a body and a mind that are both feeling the weight of everything they lost. I'm not saying that happens in all divorces. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in some that can happen. You see, most people looking at that particular person would never call what they are going through as grief. They would not look at it that way. But for some people in that same situation, that's exactly what it is. Hmm. And here's what I want to pause and say based on that scenario that I just gave you. Relationships are real as well. And relationship grief is real. It's real. Divorce grief is real. It's real. I would never minimize what someone goes through when a relationship ends because that pain is genuine and it deserves to be acknowledged. That's why I say grief, hey, grief has many facets. There's many facets to grief. And at the same time, there's a distinction worth understanding when a person is dealing with grief. When someone loses a person to death, that person is not a phone call away. That person is not a text message away. That person is not where you can reach and touch that person. They cannot be visited. Their voice cannot be heard unless a recording was saved. They are physically gone from this earth in a way that is different from any other kind of loss. That person is experiencing grief and pain just as the person who is going through a divorce is experiencing grief and pain. But there's a distinction between the two. So if you've ever tried to comfort someone grieving a death by saying, I understand because I went through a divorce, I want you to hear this very gently, very lovingly, very kindly, because both are valid, both are real pain, and both are a form of grief. The person getting a divorce, their pain is just as real. Their experience is just different. The experience is different. Both things can be true at the same time. And that understanding that there's a difference, it makes us more careful, more compassionate, and more accurate in how we show up for people. We cannot place everyone in the same basket when dealing with grief. Because what this invites us to consider is this. Let me move forward here. Um, when the grieving person that you're dealing with says their chest hurts or they cannot sleep or they have been to the doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor and no one can find it, is anything wrong, it may be worth considering that this person grief is involved in what's happening within their body. The body may be telling them the truth about something that their words have not been able to say yet. And that happens. And if that grieving person is you, please be gentle with yourself. Hey, I always say seek professional help. Go to the doctor, get checked out. Yes. If it's too much for you to handle and your body's experiencing too many signs, yes, go to the doctor, get checked out. If you're dealing with some things mentally, so go to a counselor. Yes, go get help. Not just drink the water, a lot of water. Drinking water helps too. Eating something warm when you can, that helps too. Your appetite, you need to eat, you need to rest. All of these things are true. And none of these things are small. But for some people, it's vital. I want to real briefly before I close out today, I want to touch bases on biblical character today, Hagar. Think about Hagar. I want you to read this for yourself when you get a chance to. Hagar was completely worn out when God showed up for her. She was not strong. She was not composed. She was sitting in a desert, exhausted and empty. And God did not wait for her to feel better before he moved. He met her right there in her physical weakness. If your body is carrying grief right now, if you are tired in a way that sleep does not fix, God sees that too. He has not missed it. God can be where we can't be. He can see what we can't see, and he can do what nobody else can do. The same God who provided water in the desert for Hagar is still providing for his people today. Your sunrise is not canceled because your body is tired. I'm going to give you another source here from Harvard Health Publishing. This one comes from the Consumer Health Education Division, Harvard Medical School. And this is what they said. The grieving process can cause everything from bodily pain and a weakened immune system to stomach upset and fatigue. Let's go to dimension number 3. I want to finish this episode today. We're dealing with the cognitive part of it, the cognitive, which is dealing with your grief in the mind. This one surprises some people sometimes because when we think about grief, we think about how we feel. We don't always think about how we think. But for many people, grief changes thinking in ways that can be confusing and even frightening if you do not know what may be happening. Think about it. In some cases, have you ever walked in a room and just totally forgot what you was going through? No, that doesn't mean every time you do that that you're grieving something. Because sometimes I walk in a room and I forgot something. I'd be like, come in this room for, and then I think, oh yeah. So no, that's not all the time saying a person is grieving, but sometimes it can be associated with it. They can forget appointments. They can forget names. They can forget conversations that just happened a day ago. All of these are signs of a possibility of grief dealing with the cognitive behavior. That's just part of the experience of grief. Forgetfulness, trouble concentrating, a foggy feeling that just won't lift, the heaviness, difficulty making decisions that used to feel simple. Some people describe it as just trying to think through for a minute. Everything feels slower. Everything takes more effort. That can be a sign of grief that a person is going through because the mind may be working very hard to process a significant loss. That's possible. Grief can take enormous mental energy. It can. And when that much energy is being used to carry pain, there may be less available for everyday tasks. Think of it like a device that is running something very large in the background and everything else starts to slow down. That is not a broken device. That is one doing something enormous. Okay. Um, the brain can use so much energy processing loss that sometimes everyday tasks just seem to be harder to do. And the result can look like forgetfulness. It can look like confusion. It can look like difficulty thinking clearly, but it's temporary, temporary, temporary. Um, I'm going to go down here and say this to you. When your mind cannot hold everything together right now, when you're grieving, consider something. It's only temporary. God sees you clearly. Psalms 139 tells us that God knows our thoughts before we even form. So even when you cannot think straight, even when the words will not come, God already knows. And he is not waiting for you to have it all together before he shows up. God shows up. Clarity may feel far, far, far away. but it may be closer than you think. Your sunrise is still coming. Dr. Lisa Schulman said this. She said, grief can reinforce brain wiring that effectively looks or locks the brain in a permanent stress response. Let me repeat that for you. Grief can reinforce brain wiring that effectively locks the brain in a permanent stress response. That's going to lead us into the behavior pattern of it, grief and what we do. Grief does not just affect how we feel and how we think, because it can change what a person does when dealing with grief. The way a person moves around and through their actions, the habits that shape their life daily, the places they used to go and the people they used to see. Some people withdraw completely. They stop answering the phone. They stop coming to church. They stop showing up to family gatherings. They stop showing up to community events. It is not necessarily that they stopped caring. It may be that showing up in those places just remind them of what they lost. And right now, that can just be too much for a person to carry. Other people go the opposite direction. They stay, they're constantly busy, they're filling every hour with activity, they making it to every meeting, every event, every function, because sitting still means feeling what they lost. And feeling right now may just be too much for them. So they do just the opposite and stay extremely busy. Both of those responses are understandable. Neither one means the person is broken. You see what I mean? Neither one means that, because when you look at the smaller things that people carry when they're going through grief, those are the ones that might look unusual from the outside, but carrying enormous meaning to the person who's experiencing it. I want to say something to the person who has maybe pulled away, the person who has maybe went quiet, or the person who stopped showing up and wonders if anyone even noticed. Because you know what? At one time, I was that person, but God noticed. You see, God saw Hagar just as God sees you, just as God sees me. But God, He saw Hagar when she walked away and sat down alone in the wilderness. He did not leave her there. He called to her. He said, "Fear not." He showed up in the very place she had withdrawn to. If if you have pulled back from everyone and everything, you have not pulled back from God's reach. You have not pulled back from God's reach. God knows exactly where you are, and He is not done with you yet. Your sunrise is still possible. I'm going to say this. Um, Grieving individuals, sometimes they distance themselves from social activities and relationships. And sometimes they do that out of fear of being a burden. Sometimes they do it because they don't want to be a burden. It's that simple in their mind. But let's go to the spiritual aspect of it before we close out today. That's going to be the fifth dimension, which is dealing with your faith. This is the dimension that people of faith often find the hardest to talk about sometimes, because it can feel like it should not be there. It can feel like having faith should protect you from this one. It can be like when a person pretends that it just didn't happen to them. Grief can touch faith. And when I say that, don't get me wrong on here. What I'm saying is it can shake it to the point where you ask questions, like, Lord, why? Lord, I don't understand. Why didn't you? Why didn't you? It's questions like that. Why? Why? I just need to understand. I thought I did everything right, or I'm trying to do things right. I prayed, I believed, and I still ended up here. How do I keep walking by faith when my heart doesn't understand what my eyes have just seen? That's what I'm talking about. But the Bible itself says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. You have to hold on. Hold on. Choose to hold on to God, to his, the song said, hold to his unchanging hand. Hold to God, because those questions are real questions and they deserve its space. I want you to look at something real briefly here. Let's go to Psalms, because David cried out to God he cried out in deep pain, and I want to read that to you here. He questioned, he pleaded, he said things like, "Where are you, Lord? Have you forgotten me?" And in Psalms the 13th chapter and the first verse, it says, and I'm reading from the CSV Bible, the Apologetic Study Bible. Thank you to the person who blessed me with this Bible. It says, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me, agony in my mind every day? How long will my enemy dominate me?" That's in the Bible. I know I said Psalms 13 and 1, but I went ahead and read Psalms 13, 1 through 3. I mean 1 through 2. And what I want to say here is this. God never turned away. It says in his word, Jeremiah wept. God asks God says, "I'm here," when we call on him. Hold on to him. Job asked God to tell him why. What had he done wrong for all of this to happen to him? And God showed up for every single one of them in his word. And God showed up for every single one, and he'll show up for you. The best thing I can say to you right now is study your word, pray, hold on to the Lord, talk to God, talk to him, because the church is a safe place. It should be a safe place for your questions. If you're in a season where your faith feels like it is being tested, where your prayers feel like they are not reaching anywhere, where you have not been able to open your Bible in weeks, I want you to know that you are not alone in that. And you are not too far gone, because come to him. Go to the Lord. Go to him and talk to him. Okay, we just briefly went over the 5 dimensions of grief, which are emotional, physical, cognitive, behavioral, and spiritual. And I want to bring them a little bit closer to you as we close out today. We talked about Hagar. I want you to read about the story of Hagar in the Word, because this is one place I can offer you something beyond my own experience or opinion. Isaiah 53rd chapter and 3rd verse tells us that Jesus himself is a man of word acquainted with grief. What it's saying is this: God knows everything. It says in the word that Jesus wept. He knows what you're going through. He knows your feelings. He knows what you're dealing with. Do not give up on it. Recognize when you're going through something. Recognize that when you need help. Recognize that there are times when you may not be able to stop crying. There are times when your body may hurt. There are times when you may feel like, I'm just wore out and nothing else I can do. People who are hurting are not always helped by just being told to just feel better. Sometimes what helps is when someone simply sees them and really sees what they're carrying and stays. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. As I close out today, I just want you to remember one thing. God can see what you cannot see. God can be what you cannot be. He can do what you cannot do. And hold on to him. because grief is not just sadness. Grief involves the 5 dimensions that we discussed today. You have been listening to Sunrise After Midnight with Deborah Hamm, and this is the Grief First Aid episode. And I want you to know before we close that you are not alone. You